Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Good morning. Welcome back to Financial Issues, everyone. Great to be here with you today. Seth Udinsky here with you, along with our Studio A team. Bit of a light team here this morning. Sam is away visiting some family today. So Elijah Kelly is back on the audio board. Elijah, it's great to have you, brother. Just like old times, man. This is fun.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you.
Great to see you, brother.
Good to see everyone.
Grant Ace on the TriCaster today. Grateful for the team this morning. Folks, on today's show, the Fed, surprised us. It was really a shocking thing they did yesterday. That's sarcasm. They kept rates steady, as everyone expected. So we'll see what to make of it. The markets are closed today for the Juneteenth federal holiday, which might be a gift of mercy from the sovereign hand of God, since the markets can't react to it. So we'll make some sense of that, folks. Also, it appears the United States might be cracking down on China buying up U.S. farmland. I think this is a good thing. Not China buying up U.S. farmland per se, but the United States cracking down on it. Craig Haugaard's going to join me later for a live ag report, and we'll make some sense of that together. If you've got questions for Craig, folks, please put them into the chat right now on financialissues.org/live or any of the social media outlets that you watch the show on. Also, Jeff King of International Christian Concern will join me later in the show to discuss the state of worldwide persecution in the church today. That's going to be towards the end of the show. You're not going to want to miss that for sure. Grateful to have each of you here today. I do want to remind you, we have a conference call today, later today, conference call, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. Central Time. You should have already received the alert for that conference call. If you did not receive it, check your spam folder. But you can also check the website, financialissues.org. If you're a partner, go to the partner page, click the alerts button. That'll take you to the alerts tab, and it should have the conference call information there. It has the phone number. It has the access code. That's what you'll use today for the conference call. Don't miss it. It's going to be a great time. You'll hear Shanna's wisdom. We also have the partner commentary out as well. Make sure to check out that and act on the recent sell alert that we issued for CS57. Good to be here with you all, folks. Hey, let's kick it off here today. I mentioned today is the Juneteenth federal holiday. Pretty controversial day, but I think it's worth mentioning. It was recently dubbed a federal holiday in the United States. Only several years ago, the Biden administration made it a federal holiday. Before, it was much more of a regional thing, particularly in the state of Texas. It's good to be reminded what this day actually is and what it's actually celebrating. So Juneteenth is actually the, quote, unofficial end of the American Civil War. The war officially ended, according to history, in April of 1865 at the surrender at Appomattox by General Robert E. Lee. But the truth is, it did not mean that the slaves were immediately freed. There were some regions where the news didn't travel quite as fast, and one of these was Galveston, Texas, where it took apparently over 2 months. Roughly 2,000 Union soldiers led by Major General Gordon Granger landed in Galveston Island in East Texas in June of 1865, where at that moment, several 100,000 black slaves were kept in the dark by their owners about the fact that the war was over and had been for more than 2 months. So they were still in slavery even after the war was over. On June 19th, 1865, this is over 8 weeks after the Confederate surrender at Appomattox, over 2.5 years after President Lincoln proclaimed freedom for all slaves in rebel states. Finally, these slaves in Galveston, Texas were declared free. The news was brought to their ears. Apparently, their owners were not too eager to let them know that the war was indeed over and that they had, in fact, been legally set free weeks earlier. It was not too convenient for these owners to let their slaves know. The holiday then became popular among freed blacks. It was first celebrated in 1866. But for many decades, again, it was really just recognized in Texas. But then throughout the civil rights movement of the 1960s, the holiday began to gain a lot more steam. Many liberal blacks in particular began to recognize Juneteenth, some even calling it their own Independence Day. And then in June of 2021, Joe Biden made it an official federal holiday during his administration. And again, many blacks feel that this day should be their Independence Day instead of the 4th of July. Listen, folks, let's make a little sense of this. I'm all for slaves being freed, okay? I love that. I love that the slaves were freed. I think that's fantastic. Breaking this holiday down to the raw brass tacks, it is a wonderful celebration. It's wonderful. And it's a reminder of our country's unity and the survival in its most dire hour, the Civil War, as well as the necessary end of a truly horrid practice of racial slavery, probably one of the worst black marks on the American South, a place which I love, by the way. And I think the American South is wonderful, but that is one of the black marks on it. I'm all for Juneteenth, breaking down the raw brass tacks. The problem is, this holiday has been grotesquely hijacked by political activists, not just in the way that it's celebrated, but in what truly happened as well. So for that reason alone, I have a lot of problems with this day. I don't believe that it should be a federal holiday. I think it should certainly be a day to remember specifically what happened. But here's how it's been hijacked. Let me explain this. The holiday is largely celebrated by those who are of the same political affiliation who committed the evil deed of deception in the first place. It was Democrat Southern slave owners who lied to their slaves for 2 months and kept them in the dark about the war being over and about the Confederacy having lost. Political Democrats, many of whom claim this victory is theirs, were in fact the villains in 1865. They were the ones enslaving black people and lying to them and keeping them enslaved illegally after the war was over. Sam Case, who I wish he was here today to tell us this, but I'll tell you it for him. He's dubbed this holiday as National Democrats Lying to Black People Day. That's about what it is, right? Now, many people who celebrate Juneteenth would say, no, that's not right. That's not fair. Folks, listen, I'm not saying this either to be an apologist for the Republican Party. Okay, there's a lot of issues with the modern Republican Party as well. But historically, the Republican Party was the party of abolition, the party of equality. In fact, it was in many ways born out of the struggle in the Civil War. The first black senators in this country were Republicans. They served in the Republican caucus as early as 1870. By the early 1870s, there were 8 black U.S. senators. Do you want to know when the first Democrat black senator served in our country? 1993. Carol Moseley Braun was the first one. 1993. I was born by that point, folks. It took 130 years for the party of equality to get a black person into the Senate. And which party is the party of racism? Liberal Democrats would love for you not to know that historical fact.
Oh, 100%.
Right,
Seth.
Elijah?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the Democrats have always been kind of using blacks for their own political agenda for years now.
It's a sad thing.
Just saving face, trying to, doing things like this. And it seems like they always jump on the next thing that's going to get them, acknowledged. So yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Absolutely. And it's not all Democrats, but a lot of them, a lot of the liberals today, for 100 years, over 100 years, actually, the Democrats were kind of unashamed of being known as the party of racism. It was the Democrats who rebelled against the Union in 1861. They opposed Reconstruction all the way up until the 1960s. And yes, it was the Democrats who lied to their black slaves in Galveston in 1865 after the war was over and the slaves were legally declared free. And sadly, for the most part, the liberal Democrat caucus today continues to be the party of racism and the party of enslavement of black folks. Only the slavery looks a little different today. Rather than putting them in chains, rather than making them work in cotton fields, liberal Democrats feed black folks the lie that fathers are useless, the natural family is a joke, and the government will take good care of you as long as you vote for the right people. I can recall Joe Biden during his presidency saying something to the effect of, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Right, Elijah?
Yep.
That's racist. Yeah. That is so racist.
I don't know how you get to that point.
He said something like, if you can't tell the difference between me and Trump, you ain't black.
Yeah.
Boy, what a racist thing to say. And you know what's really sad? Much of this rhetoric came as the result of the civil rights movement of the 1960s. The civil rights movement of the 1960s was a tremendous thing that happened that was also far more complicated than your history books perhaps tell you. And unfortunately, out of the civil rights movement came the notion that it's far better, especially for black women, to rely on the government to take care of them than their husbands, for example. Elijah, am I correct in that?
That's just what the climate is. Yeah. I mean, make black people rely on them. I mean, broken households, given, the whole feminist movement, bringing women out of their homes, giving them alternative routes to provide for their family and break the whole household up. And now it's like, okay, now we're sitting in poverty. Now we're kind of depending on them to rescue us again. I mean, is this slavery? I mean, I don't think it's physical slavery. It may be, something else where,
deception, the type of slavery. Yeah, absolutely. And Elijah, I'm so grateful for men like you who are breaking that mold. Elijah's a dedicated father, loves his children, provides for them. That's awesome, man. You're setting a new trajectory. That's so cool. Folks, we'll speak more about this coming on the other side of this break here, but I thought it would be a good idea for us to make some sense of truly what this day actually is, and hopefully to come to the truth of it as we seek the moral restoration of our country. So we got more financial issues coming up right after this. Don't go anywhere.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common, the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
Through Crossroads Kids Club, lives like Dali's are being changed all over the world.
When I was 8 years old, my parents separated temporarily. It made me feel lost, empty, and without direction. Until one day, I went with my cousins to the Crossroads Club. This led me to know Lord Jesus and accept Him in my heart. He changed my life, and I don't feel lonely anymore.
Reaching kids with the hope of the gospel in schools and across the world. You can change a young life today at reachOurschools.com.
I found out I was pregnant when I was 21 years old. For me, I was scared, I was shaking. They do an ultrasound, and that's when everything changed. When I saw my baby and when I heard her heartbeat, that was it. We've seen the hand of God ever since we stepped into the pregnancy center.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of Preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shanna are hers alone and are for informational purposes only, and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it, and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Folks, I so appreciate you joining us today. Just to finish my thoughts on that segment there, one of the chief political tactics of liberals in our modern day today, many of them, of course, vote Democrat, is division. And of course, unfortunately, the modern holiday of Juneteenth reeks of division. It stinks of it. Smells terrible. Here are some of the agendas. Get the voting base to reject the 4th of July and celebrate Juneteenth instead. Division. Get the voting base to hate your own country. Reject national heroes, sing a fake national anthem, the black national anthem. We have one national anthem, folks, okay? And rejecting and hating national heroes who, listen, we're flawed just like any of us is flawed. If we were all judged by the worst things we ever did, we'd all get canceled, okay? Also getting their voting base to believe a false narrative about their country's history. Isn't that exactly what the Galveston slave owners did in the spring of 1865? Believe a false narrative. You're still in slavery. The war's not over. It's a lie. They're liars. Folks, we as a country need to return to unity. We need to be good stewards of our nation, preserving the truth of the past. We need to pray and bring our nation before the throne of God. believing that God is not done with us yet, and that he will do great things for us, and that our nation can be a conduit of blessing throughout the world if we would simply repent and allow God to be the one to rule us. And most importantly, I think this is probably the most important lesson personally that we can learn from what happened on the very first Juneteenth, if you want to call it that, June of 1865. You got to let our yes be yes and our no be no. Don't be a liar. Those slave owners were liars. Many politicians today are liars. Don't be a liar. Never bear false witness. That's breaking one of the commandments. Honor God with your words. Be truthful in all things. Remember that the Lord himself is truth, and that he is the way, the truth, and the life. Hope that can be encouraging for you today, folks. Well, let's move now to the markets, which are closed today, by the way. Of course, the big news yesterday was the Fed. We mentioned this earlier. The Federal Reserve held interest rates steady. They kept the key borrowing rate targeted in the range between 4.25 and 4.5%. It's kind of plateaued there, if you want to call it that. Same since December. Fed Chair Powell spoke about this decision yesterday. Here's what he had to say about it. Here's the Fed Chair.
It's coming up. Oh, I don't
Sounds
think
good.
we have this clip. We can go ahead and get
Here,
it.
I'll keep on riffing while we're getting that up. You guys just tell me when that clip's ready there.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, Fed Powell spoke about that yesterday, of course. The FOMC statement changed a little from the May meeting. Broadly speaking, the economy grew at a solid pace with low unemployment and somewhat elevated inflation. The FOMC basically said, quote, uncertainty about the economic outlook has diminished but remains elevated. Looks like we got that clip ready now. So let's hear what Fed Chair Powell had to say about it. Here he is.
My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. Despite elevated uncertainty, the economy is in a solid position. The unemployment rate remains low, and the labor market is at or near maximum employment. Inflation has come down a great deal, but has been running somewhat above our 2% longer run objective. In support of our goals, today the Federal Open Market Committee decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged. We believe that the current stance of monetary policy leaves us well positioned to respond in a timely way to potential economic developments.
So kind of the same gobbledygook that you would expect, folks. Not a whole lot of clarity from the Federal Reserve, of course. I believe, Lige, do we have one more clip of Powell? We can hear him say one more thing if you guys have that ready. Awesome. Okay, sounds good. So yeah, the Fed is still projecting 2 rate cuts later this year. So once again, folks, it seems to me like the Federal Reserve just doesn't know what they're talking about. Here was Powell one more time, bringing little in terms of overall clarity to the situation. Here's Jerome Powell.
Near-term measures of inflation expectations have moved up over recent months, as reflected in both market and survey-based measures. Respondents to surveys of consumers, businesses, and professional forecasters point to tariffs as the driving factor. Beyond the next year or so, however, most measures of longer-term expectations remain consistent with our 2% inflation goal. The median projection in the SEP for total PCE inflation this year is 3%, somewhat higher than projected in March.
So there you go, folks. Not a whole lot of clarity there from the Fed coming down the mountain of the Federal Reserve there in Washington, D.C. The markets yesterday spent a lot of the day moderately positive while they were awaiting the Fed's announcement. By late afternoon, after the announcement, the indices seemed a little disappointed, but they really weren't in too much of a tizzy as the Fed seems to be, according to the markets, dragging his feet to cut rates. So by Wednesday's closing bell, the Dow Jones finished 0.1% negative. The S&P 500 was right around the flat line, just below. And the NASDAQ finished positive, squeaked above the flat line at about 1/12% in the positive, 1/8% in the positive or so. Once again, the markets are closed today, folks, so there's not going to be a lot of activity there today with it being a federal holiday. But let's move for just a moment here to some interesting headlines that I saw in the last several days. The first one concerns Trump's gold card. If you've heard about this, folks, nearly 70,000 have signed up for this. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said this week that nearly 70,000 people have signed up for the gold card visa program. Just again, if you have forgotten what this is, the plan gives foreigners legal U.S. residence in return for a $5 million investment into U.S. businesses. So there's a good trade-off there. If all the current applicants amendments are approved, it could generate over $345 million of foreign investments. Applicants will be vetted by the Department of State, Commerce, and Homeland Security, for what that's worth. It's possible citizens from certain high-risk countries will be barred from applying. Now, take that for what it's worth. What a high-risk country is, I can presume probably China would be one of those, maybe at this point Iran, perhaps Russia, maybe some other ones like that. But I think overall it's a good idea, and I think one that can certainly generate success to invest in America first, as Trump has touted. That's been his goal. And anything to be able to achieve that goal, I think, is really good. Now, the question has to be, what kind of bad actors could get their hands on one of these? I'm sure there are people out there in the world, on the world stage, who are smart enough to appear as if they're not from a high-risk place or a high-risk person, but they might actually be. So we're actually going to touch a little bit on this topic with Craig later on in the show when we're referring to Farmland, investing in U.S. farmland, which I know is a little bit different, but there are some similarities there as well. So that's going to be really kind of the thing to look for. And hopefully the state commerce and Homeland Security departments can do their job. I think that's really going to be the big indicator for how this goes. Elsewhere, Social Security and Medicare are looking now to run out by 2033. That was sooner than before, but a new analysis from the Treasury Department says that these government programs for seniors will run short for full benefits in less than 10 years. So that's, what is that, 8 years from now, 2033? 3 years sooner than last year's estimate for the Medicare Hospital Insurance Fund. Folks, this is a tough situation, and I want to tread very carefully here, but at the same time, I'm called to speak the truth, as we just talked about. So here's the deal. This is a program that never should have existed in the first place. It is a socialist-style program that was created to mimic socialist-style programs, and I say this with all charity, that breaking it down, if I had to choose between these programs staying or going, I would obviously pick them going. I think the way to go about that is very, very complicated, but I would much rather us not have socialist programs. It's not the government's job to be a charity. Never was, and that never works. That's not the role of government. And now it's easy for me to say this, and many of you might be thinking, especially if you're in that age group, well, of course it's easy for you to say this, Seth. You're in your 30s. It doesn't impact you. It actually does impact me because I pay into something that I will probably not be able to use. So it may not impact me in the sense of I'm receiving the benefits from it, but I can certainly see the drawbacks to it. And I think you would agree with me, even if you're receiving benefits for it. The U.S. government's not a charity. And this is really where I think a good long-term investment strategy can be so key for you. That's the solution. The solution is investing. And you know, I think this can come from personal investments. I think this also can come from your employer as well. You know, businesses taking care of their employees, giving them the chance to be able to save up for when they are retirement age so that they don't need Social Security and Medicare. But listen, folks, if you're a young person out there, as I'm doing, you've heard Shanna and Jason talk about this, don't bank on this stuff being available for you. You've got to invest now. I would say you should plan as if there will be $0 available for you in Social Security. $0. So it's up to you to be able to plan well, to invest well. We provide that long-term investment strategy here. That's why we say, you know, we've answered questions like this on the show before, is 8 to 10 years the goal? And I would say it's really not the goal. 8 to 10 years is the starting point. You got to keep on going and going and going for lifetime. Now, of course, that depends on your time frame, your risk tolerance, all that stuff. The solution for how to get rid of this, and I want to admit fully, I don't have the solution. I don't know how. But I believe this is something that is unfortunately a sign of a more socialist government, and I think we need to be very careful when, as a country, we step towards socialism and away from personal freedom. So I'm all for slashing it. The answer to how, I'm not exactly sure. So if you have solutions for that, you're welcome to put them in the chat there. We'll see how that goes. Elsewhere, in some good news, let's look at some good news here for a change. The U.S. Supreme Court upheld a Tennessee ban on trans drugs for kids. Tremendous win for Christians, tremendous win for conservatives, as the High Court acted in accordance with natural law and common sense. It upheld a Tennessee law banning transgender drugs and surgeries for children. Tennessee AG Jonathan Skermetti defended the law before SCOTUS SCOTUS in December, saying it was, quote, protecting kids from the consequences of decisions that they cannot fully understand. He is exactly right. We don't allow children to drive a car. We don't allow children to drink alcohol. We don't allow children to smoke a cigarette. We don't allow children to do a lot of different things like that. But for some reason, it's okay to allow children to make life-altering decisions to their body, their private parts of all things, by the way. It's ridiculous. Justice Clarence Thomas noted in his concurring opinion that, quote, recent revelations suggest that leading evidences in transgender medicine have relied on questionable evidence. Leading voices have relied on questionable evidence and have allowed ideology to influence their medical guidance. All three liberal justices avoided common sense, voted to strike down the law. So that's concerning there. Justice Sonia Sotomayor claimed access to so-called gender-affirming care is a question of life or death. She is lying. It is not. The comments that I have here, this concerns Sotomayor as well as the other two members of the highest court in the land who could not admit common sense with this one. That is concerning to me. That's gravely concerning that three people in the highest court of the land cannot use common sense, whether for political reasons or otherwise. But this is a great victory for us, folks. If you want to learn more about this, we had Walt Heyer on the show back on June 4th. You can listen to his incredible story of going through transgender surgery and then detransitioning and now becoming an advocate, speaking out against this horrible evil. This is why we do what we do here, folks, is to bring the light into these dark places. If you have to leave us, we hope you have a great day. Join us for the conference call later today, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 Central. Craig Haugaard coming up next on Financial Issues.
In the last 10 to 15 years being in ministry, being married, something that has been constant in our lives is Samaritan Ministries. As we've moved, we've had babies, we've had different things come up, we have just been able to rely on Samaritan in ways that we never really even thought about before becoming members.
Our heart's desire is to plant roots and be in a place for a really long time. It's how we were raised. We see the benefits of that, but we also see the open-handedness of being used by the Lord wherever He calls, because we just assumed when we started pursuing church planting, the quickest way to get from point A to point B is a straight line. And with the Lord, sometimes you find out it looks a lot more like this. And yet, Samaritan was with us through the entire thing.
We didn't have to look into, we have to change insurances now because we've moved states or whatever the case may be. And it's just been a real blessing to us in different phases of life.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Colleen.
And we're the Gen X.
And we're Samaritan members.
Gain valuable insights from partners sharing about financial issues.
So hard, all of us do, to get this money, and I knew nothing about how to use it appropriately, biblically. And the strategy is so simple. You guys are on the front line of the battle.
My wife and I have been partners with you for several years, and we have benefited greatly from your advice and your ministry.
I do nothing without following FISM's advice on stocks, and especially since it's coming from a spiritual foundation.
You are amazing. Nobody is doing what you are doing for the body of Christ.
I just wanted to call and thank you for the advice that you gave me a little over a year ago. It has panned out very well.
I've never dreamed I'd be able to give money like this.
Become a partner today by simply going to financialissues.org/join. Click the green button to become a partner today.
One of the emphases of preborn has been ultrasound in two ways. An ultrasound machine if a pregnancy clinic doesn't have one, and then an ultrasound session, which we underwrite hundreds of thousands of those. We've seen over and over again the dramatic results that when a woman encounters her baby for the first time and hears that heartbeat, she realizes the magnitude of what's happening here, that there is somebody else, that's her baby. So this is why preborn pushes out ultrasound as much as we possibly can. Preborn has seen over 200,000 babies saved, over 59,000 people come to Christ, populating earth and eternity, life for this life and life forever. Save the baby's life, but save the mother's life so that she can lead that baby to Christ. If we're bringing people into this world and the mother doesn't receive Christ and the child is born and the child lives its life and doesn't receive Christ, this is not a good end. And so we have to have the gospel as part and parcel and really the heartbeat of what preborn is.
all, folks. Quick chat rundown. We got John in Alabama, Brian in Missouri, George, North Carolina. Good to see you, brother. Lisa, Texas. Hello, Lisa. Brian in Virginia. Brian, great to see you as well, brother. Dave and Darlene in Virginia. Also, James in South Carolina. Grateful to have each of you today. If I missed anyone, I apologize in advance. Oh, and Uncle John, of course. Great to see you, Uncle John. Thank you for your encouragement. Joseph and Cecilia in Florida as well. I see you guys there this morning. So happy to have you all on Financial Issues today. Joe in Virginia is there as well. Hello, Joe. Nice to see you. All right, folks, I got a special treat for you. The brilliance level of the show has just increased tenfold as we were talking during the break because Craig Haugaard is on with me now. Craig Haugaard, our Financial Issues Ag reporter. Craig, I appreciate you so much, brother. Thanks for coming on the show and just making everything better.
Well, it's always my pleasure, Seth. The fact that I increased the brilliance level means we started at a very, very low bar.
That's right, man. We're just trying to get any wins we can here, Craig. It's fun stuff. No, we're thrilled to have you, buddy. Let's kick it off with something that you and I have touched on at various times on the show in the last few years. The threat of communist China buying up U.S. farmland and using it for heaven knows what. That is obviously a concern to me. It seems like it might finally be a concern to the U.S. government, though, because they may be doing something about it now. What do you make of this? What do we need to know?
Well, it's kind of interesting that back in 1978, they passed a bill called the Foreign Investment Disclosure Act, but really had no teeth in it, and they've really done nothing with it, it seems like. And recently there's been a push. In fact, there's a bill, investment, Foreign Investment Improvement Disclosure Improvement Act. There we go. If I raised the brilliance, you were really bad before.
Greg, listen, you're doing great, brother.
Was a stumbling mess, man.
even when words seem to defeat you, you just conquer them. You push through.
There we go. So it's kind of piggybacking off of that 1978 bill.
Okay.
But a lot more teeth into it, and a real national security focus on it as well.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting when you look at what's happened with China. We saw a big surge in Chinese land ownership, and basically it's when they bought Smithfield Foods. It's a large pork producer and a Chinese concern, bought them a few years ago, and that really, of course, jumped the amount of land that they owned in the United States with that acquisition. So, and then actually they peaked out in 2021. China owned about 384,000 acres of farmland in the United States. And since then it's sold off. They got about 277,000 acres now, but it's been a big concern. And we've seen them do some strange things where they're buying land near military installations and that type of thing. So I do think that the government is taking it seriously, and I think that this new act is a real step forward in kind of protecting the sovereignty of our nation.
Yeah. So, Craig, how does it exactly work? Like, do they just evict the Chinese business owners? Do they tell them you can't be on the land anymore? Do they then give it to U.S. farmers? How does that work?
That I'm not sure of. At this point, it seems to be more of a reporting, and then I think there's some extra steps that they have to go through if you're going to purchase that land. Now, the land that they currently own, I don't know if that's being dealt with, to be honest with you, but I think it's more with an eye on future ownership. And to the point where there's some investment strategies you can enter that include like owning ownership, owning pieces of a farm, where you get groups together. Acre Traders, one company that buys farms and then sells them to pools of investors.
Yeah.
And even if a Chinese wanted to be a part of that pool, even that would be reported now, which has not been the case in the past. So it's going to be, I think, interesting moving forward. And once that's in place, if they go back and examine how some of this land's being used, I think you probably get into more, FBI, CIA type, national security type functions at that point.
Sure. Now, I can imagine, Craig, the Chinese probably are not using this currently. Like you said, it's kind of suspicious where they're setting the land up right near U.S. Nuclear bases, things like that. They're probably not using this land for farming and agriculture right now, I would imagine.
I think the bulk of it probably actually is, Seth.
Really?
Especially when you look at that Smithfield piece.
Yeah.
I mean, the Smithfield piece was really interesting. But I think this goes back to a conversation we had here a few months ago.
Yeah.
On how China views food versus how we view food.
Right.
And, they're also getting farmland in Brazil and in Africa. And I think there's a very big concern. If you're a communist nation and basically a dictatorship, the one thing you have to do is keep them fed, right?
Yeah.
Hungry people tend to want to get rid of the leader and get food. And so I think there's a real emphasis on providing food for their people. That was a big push behind getting Smithfield. China's the number one pork producer in the world, and they love pork. Or Smithfield was a very large pork producer here in the U.S. So I think a lot of what they've done really revolves around food security for their people.
Yeah,
and that's something that as we've discussed, we've never experienced famine in our lifetime.
Yeah.
But in the lifetime of China and people in the former Soviet Union, that type of thing, it's very fresh memories. And so it's a long-winded answer, but sure. I do think that I do think we ought to be looking at food in this country more as a national security issue as well. But I do think that's what China is doing, and that's part of the drive behind the land. Now, there's also some nefarious things that go on as well, but a large part of it, I believe, is food security for their population.
So, Craig, that then leads to my next question. It seems like this would have a huge impact on the Chinese food supply. And once again, I'm all for this. I don't want Chinese, communist Chinese owners buying up U.S. farmland. But if the evictions start to happen, if they start to leave, would this have any kind of negative tertiary impact on the U.S. food supply?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
I mean, the land is going to be in production, and when you look at the amount of grain that we produce that gets exported anyway, if you look at soybeans, for example, about 1 out of every 3 bushels of soybeans that are grown in the United States end up exported to China. I mean, they're also already a huge source of where our excess production goes, and so that demand is going to be there when you look at demand from a worldwide perspective. So I don't see any drag on U.S. production at all.
Good. Well, speaking of U.S. food, Craig, I love having a good burger on the grill. And unfortunately, this summer seems like beef prices may be a little bit higher, making it a little tougher for me to enjoy a good, well-cooked burger. What can you tell us about this as we look at beef prices?
Well, the cattle herds have been shrinking. In fact, we looked at the total cattle inventory that they did back in January of 2025, nationwide there was 86.7 million head of cattle in the United States. Now that sounds like a lot of cattle, right? But it's actually the lowest level that we've seen since 1951. And then when you think about the amount of those cattle that are dairy cows, milk cows, that's about 10 million of those. So you're not going to eat burgers there. And then you've got about 33 million of those that are female cows that they're keeping back to continue to raise calves out of. So you get to be just a lot less meat supply than what the demand is out there. And as a result, we've got the highest cattle prices we've seen in the history of the nation. It's just been a runaway. So longer term, you start to wonder about, well, with these really high prices, you would expect people to start trying to increase the amount of cattle, and to do that, they need to save heifers back rather than sending them to the feedlot to feed out for production. But what we're seeing is that there's such poor pasture conditions through much of the main beef growing area of the nation that they really don't have the grass to sustain a larger herd right now, and so we're really not seeing heifers being kept back. So in the near term, I don't see the number of cows that are available to calve and ultimately provide more burgers to the grocery store. That cow herd does not seem to be increasing. And until we see that start to increase, and then even when that happens, to increase that, you're going to have to save heifers back rather than feed them out and butcher them, right? So there's going to be, I think we're looking at a longer time period here of high meat prices before this thing corrects itself. But when you have the least amount of cattle you've had in 70 some years, it's a little concerning as we've seen population grow and certainly the demand for beef continues to grow. I think we're looking at high prices certainly through this summer and probably for a couple more years to go.
Craig, appreciate you bringing that to our attention, brother, as always. Last thing, brother, I know your health has been improving. We're so grateful for that. You're giving me text updates of the races that you're running throughout the world, and I'm just so impressed by that. Give our listeners a quick update. How are you feeling?
Yeah, things are going really well.
Good.
You know, it's I've got I'm going to be in the Cleveland Clinic tomorrow. For a checkup, but so far so good. And as you know, here a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I did a 31-mile race. That's the first time
amazing
in three years that I've done anything nearly that long. So things are going well. I'm old and still doing stupid stuff. So,
that's awesome, Craig. You're a real life superhero, my friend. Not just in your physique, but in the way that you come on the show and bless us with your brilliance, brother. I appreciate you so much, man. Looking forward to the next time, as always, folks. That's Craig Haugaard, our financial issues ag reporter. You can catch the ag report every day on financial issues right around this time. More financial issues coming up right after this. Stick with us.
It's up to us to stand up and say, enough is enough. All of this unbiblical stuff that's going on, whether it's abortion or transsexual or LGBTQ, widespread pornography, human trafficking. Bottom line, it's still up to us. If we stop investing in these corporations that are trying to destroy us, sooner or later they're going to wake up.
To learn more about biblically responsible mutual funds and ETFs, go to timothyplan.com.
My baby was like this big, and I saw his heart beating on the screen. I went from, I don't want this baby, to talking to my child on the screen. That sonogram changed my life. I went from just Candace to Mom.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of Preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
Through Crossroads Kids Club, lives like Sarah E's are being changed all over the world.
When I was 8 or 9 years old, I became aware of the kind of family environment that I was living in. My father, thanks to his alcoholism and drug use, ran the home with insults, physical and psychological abuse. And that led me to start harming myself. But when the church started the Crossroads Club, it helped me to draw closer to feeling Christ in my heart again and to heal. When I was at the Crossroads Club, seeing the volunteers serving God, this truly filled my heart with a lot of joy. I wanted to be like them.
Reaching kids with the hope of the gospel in schools and across the world. You can change a young life today at reachOurSchools.com.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Hey, thanks for hanging with us here on Financial Issues, folks. It's been a delight. Great to be here with you all today. I got a special guest here for our final segment, folks. It's wonderful to keep an eye on what's going on around the world, especially as it concerns our brothers and sisters in Christ. That's our first focus when it comes to global issues is the church, is believers across the world. So I've got a very special guest with me here, Jeff King. Jeff is the president of International Christian Concern. He's an expert on global Christian persecution. He's agreed to join us on the show today for an interview. Jeff, thank you for joining us, brother. It's wonderful to have you.
Seth, it's an honor to be with you guys.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Jeff, begin by just sharing with our audience who you are and what you do as president of ICC. What is ICC dedicated to?
Yeah, so we help persecuted Christians around the world. We do it in 3 ways. We do direct assistance. So that means if a pastor's killed, we take care of his family. We push the gospel out in the toughest places. We work on Capitol Hill. That's advocacy. We work with senators, congressmen, congresswomen, opening prison doors, influencing. And then a lot of this work where we just try to get the church and the secular media to awaken to what's happening with persecution.
Jeff, that's awesome, and we want to support that work that you guys do. Our twofold mission here at our ministry, by the way, is to defund darkness through what we call biblically responsible investing, and then fund the light through joyful and generous giving. And you guys certainly are examples of the light, bringing the gospel and coming along and supporting those who have brought the gospel into such dark places that they're experiencing persecution. It's wonderful to join you guys in lifting them up. So thank you, Jeff, for the work that you guys do. So let's open up generally here. What is the state of Christian persecution in the world today? Are Christians being persecuted heavily? Are we seeing a drawback in persecution? Give us a sense of this.
No, it's very much been on the upswing probably for the last 10 years.
Okay.
It's always existent. Jesus promised us that. He said, if they hated me, they're going to hate you. If they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. So that's just unusual for us here in the United States. Generally in the West, we're starting to feel very light persecution. But around the world, it's gotten tougher and tougher. In the last 20 years, we've seen a huge uptick in persecution in China, in India, Nigeria. Nigeria has seen probably almost 100 Christians murdered in the last 20 years, 3.5 million Christian farmers, their land stolen. And that's not to mention the normal hotspots like North Korea, where it's just mind-bending what's going on.
Yeah, and Jeff, it's fascinating to see that, because whenever we see upticks in persecution, it seems to me like historically the pattern has been the persecution grows and the church grows. And I certainly would never want to pray for persecution, but I think at the same time we can simply rest in God's sovereignty and love and care for his church, knowing that even in the midst of persecution, the church continues to grow. I'll ask you about that in just a moment, Jeff. Before I do, though, I would love to just focus here for a moment on the Middle East, which has been a hotbed of Christian persecution for many centuries. Obviously, we're looking at the war between Israel and Iran, and of course, we here at the ministry, we're praying for victory for Israel, but even more than that, we pray for God's hand of protection over the Christians who are involved and impacted. What trials and persecutions are Christians in the Middle East facing as a result of this conflict between Jews and Muslims?
Well, boy, that's a big question, and it really depends on which country, because there's some very moderate countries. Iran, as you know, is just one of the worst.
Yeah.
For 40 years, they have been assassinating, torturing, murdering, raping Christians, putting them into one of the worst prisons on earth for Christians and torturing them. So that's the very big picture.
Yeah.
The encouraging thing is that all that, and this kind of points back to your earlier point, that all that persecution has done nothing but fuel the growth of the church to the point that, look, Islam is largely dead in Iran. So that the old still go to the mosques are generally empty. Christianity has exploded. So I would say, first of all, that's the backdrop to what's going on in the Middle East or in Iran, right? And so I think you would see the masses of Iran, you'd see the Christians are all, it's not that they're pulling for Israel, but they would very much like to see the downfall of this government. They're wretched. They're wretched towards their own people. They've demolished the country. They're extremely oppressive and corrupt, and that's how they're viewed in their own country. So overthrow of the Revolutionary Guard is the hope of the day.
That's awesome. And so, seeing the gospel continuing to penetrate that region is something that we do pray for here, Jeff. I'm sure you guys do as well. What kind of work do you guys do, particularly in the Middle East, as it comes to seeing the gospel penetrate these regions that historically have been Muslim dominated?
Yeah, well, we've done lots of work. We've been working in Syria, for instance, for the last 10 years. Now, it's almost getting pushed off the headlines, believe it or not, because of what's happening in Iran. We've worked in Iran for years. I'll never forget meeting with lots of pastors that were being pulled out of Iran to nearby countries, and you meet with these guys, and you just give them a chance to breathe and to worship openly and to worship with each other. Now, the interesting thing is they all actually had to have pseudonyms just for security. None of them could use their real names, but you'd pull them out of the country and let them worship. And one of the greatest stories I've ever heard on evangelism came from one of these brothers. And they said, the American pastors, they're always trying to teach us how to do evangelism. And they'll use Western methods. And I stand up and I say, look, this doesn't work in our country. They said, here's how it works in Iran. I stand up at a party and I say, I'm a Christian. And I'm going to be back in this corner, and I'm going to be talking about Christianity. And so if you're interested and you want to hear about Jesus, come talk to me. He says, then I'm mobbed for 3 or 4 hours. He says, that's how we do evangelism. And that's the hunger for the gospel, that crushing, the darkness that overtakes the nation when it's ruled by radical Islam. It's very dark, and people are dying for the truth, and they see it. You see it in the persecuted Christian. And so they gather around the man in the desert that has a canteen. Everyone will gather around. And the woman in the dark that has the candle, everyone will gather around her. So that's the story of persecution.
Jeff, that's such a breath of fresh air. Not to dunk on the church in America. I love the American church. I'm a member of the American church. But we could really learn a lesson from the boldness there, right? We see a lot of seeker-sensitive movements, different things like that. We just need to be bold, preach the gospel with boldness. That's amazing. Jeff, back to the question that I was asking earlier. Throughout church history, seems to be the case. The more persecution happens, the more the church tends to grow. How do you reconcile this? And then how can we pray dually for both the growth of the church and the protection of the church? I think it's so foolish to pray for persecution. We should not do that. It's coming. Like you said, the Lord Jesus promised we'd get persecuted. It's a waste of a prayer to pray for persecution, but to pray for the strength to withstand it. How do we reconcile those things and pray for those things?
Well, what an educated question, Seth. I so appreciate that and the nuance you're bringing out to it. So first of all, historically, it's not always true, but almost always true that persecution produces church growth. And think about it this way. So in a persecuted country, you're going to lose all kinds of goodies, including your health and even your life if you follow Christ. But it starts with you're going to be disliked by the culture. You're going to be seen as an enemy. And then it goes to you can lose your job. And then it goes to you can lose your kids. Your kids' education goes bye-bye. And then you can start having regular meetings with the secret police, being beaten on a regular basis, and then captured into prison, tortured, murdered. So you think about that. What does that do to the body? Who is left in the body of Christ after that selection process? It's only those who are completely desperate for the Lord, who love him so much and have to survive on him to be fueled. So that's that picture. That's the man in the desert with the canteen. That's that woman in the dark with the candle. Because these are dark places. That means satanic rule is very strong. And anywhere that's happening, it's the land of Mordor, if we get the reference.
Oh, yeah.
And
love that.
Yeah. So anybody who has the light, anybody who has food, everyone gathers around and says, please tell me what you have. I need that. I want that. That is what happens with the persecuted church. And Seth, I can't agree with you more. We don't want to pray for it here, but at the same time, I think too often we're worried about our careers. We're worried about our 401ks, and that is not the Lord's way. Yeah. So we want to be successful, but always, always the top of the heap in our heart is the throne of God. And so we continually have to step off that throne and say, if the finances go, so be it. But Lord God, give us revival. Give me personal revival and give us revival in our country.
Yep. Jeff, that's so well said. Quickly, brother, here, we're coming to the end, but I want to give you a chance to tell us how we can learn more about your ministry, pray for your ministry, support your ministry. Where can we go?
Yeah, we'll go to persecution.org, and the first thing I would tell anybody is just start getting information. So get our newsletter, get our emails, and if it's not us, go to one of the other great persecution ministries, but get informed, because as we have discussed, this is in your self-interest. The persecuted will transform your faith. It happens over and over. People get hooked because the lessons they're being taught and what they're understanding from the persecuted. So persecution.org.
Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today, on our program, brother. It was a blessing for me to get to speak with you, and I look forward to the next time that we get to do it. Thank you, brother.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, sir. Folks, that's Jeff King, again, from International Christian Concern, persecution.org. Folks, great to be here with you on the show today. I hope you do join us for our conference call later today. Conference call, 12 p.m. Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Remember to check your email and check the alerts page as well for the information to call in and join for all of our partners. That's it for today's show, folks. Remember, it's all His. Let's be found good and faithful stewards. God bless you all, and we'll see you next time for more financial issues.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.